Welcome back to Enigmatic Echoez, the podcast where folklore, urban legends, and the unexplained refuse to stay buried. I'm your host, Jazz, and before we begin, if my pronunciations wander off into the woods tonight, they're just investigating ahead of us. Now, you know, trees usually have a pretty good reputation. They give us oxygen, shade, and that one branch that somehow smacks you directly in the face, even though you swear you ducked. These trees skipped all that. Instead, they've spent decades collecting stories of murder, curses, ghosts, and enough bad vibes to make you reconsider hiking altogether. So turn the lights down, get comfortable, and let's step beneath the branches. Tonight's first stop takes us to Port St. Lucie, Florida. Unlike many legends we've explored, this story doesn't begin with folklore. It begins with a documented horror. During the early 1970s, former Sheriff's Deputy Gerard John Schaefer shocked Florida investigators. In 1973, Schaefer was convicted of murdering two teenage girls, Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. Investigators also connected him to numerous additional disappearances and murders throughout South Florida. Although the exact number of victims have never been proven, some estimates range far higher, but those remain speculation rather than confirmed fact. Even today, no one knows exactly how many lives he may have taken. Sometimes, the scariest monsters don't need claws, they wear badges. Many of Schaefer's crimes occurred in isolated wooded areas throughout St. Lucie County and nearby counties. Years later, local folklore became attached to a large oak, now standing within Oak Hammock Park. Today, this tree is widely known as the Devil's Tree. Here's where it's important to separate history from legend. Some local stories claim this was the very tree where Schaefer restrained victims. Others say it simply stands near locations connected with his crimes. No public evidence has confirmed that the famous Devil's Tree visitors see today is the exact crime scene, and local officials have cautioned against presenting it as such. What is documented is Schaefer's brutality. The legends surrounded the tree grew afterward. Sometimes a place becomes haunted not because something supernatural happened there, but because people can never forget what happened nearby. Imagine driving down a quiet Florida road just before midnight. The humidity hangs in the air like a heavy blanket. Spanish moss drifts gently between branches. The chorus of insects fills the darkness. Then, without warning, everything goes quiet. Visitors have described this moment over and over again. Whether it's coincidence or simply the natural rhythm of wildlife, that sudden silence has become one of the most talked about experiences surrounding the tree. And honestly, silence can be far more unsettling than noise, because your imagination loves filling in the blanks. Now, over the years, paranormal investigators have brought cameras, voice recorders, EMF meters, and enough equipment to make it look like they're filming the world's least exciting reality show. Many leave disappointed. Others don't. Some report batteries draining unusually fast. Photographs appear darker than expected. Audio recordings interrupted by static. Again, none of this proves anything paranormal. Florida's heat and humidity are notoriously hard on electronics. Old batteries fail, camera sensors struggle in low light. Those explanations deserve just as much consideration. Still, it's interesting how often different visitors tell remarkably similar stories. Now, one of the oldest legends says you should never damage the tree, never carve your initials into the bark, never break off a branch, and definitely don't try taking home a souvenir. According to local folklore, anyone who removes part of the tree invites terrible luck. Car accidents, financial problems, relationships falling apart, sudden illness. Has anyone ever proven those events were caused by the tree? No. But cursed objects rarely survive because of evidence. They survive because every unfortunate coincidence becomes another story someone is eager to tell. Some visitors claim they've heard whispering. Others describe distant crying. A few insist they heard someone moving through the underbrush only to find themselves completely alone. Of course, Florida forests are full of wildlife: raccoons, possums, wild hogs, even the occasional armadillo. Although if you've ever been startled by an armadillo at night, you'll understand why some ghost stories start the way they do. One investigator recalled hearing what sounded like slow footsteps circling him. Every time he turned, nothing. No movement, no person, only darkness stretching between the trees. Whether those sounds came from an unseen animal or an overreactive imagination sharpened by the location's grim history is impossible to say. Perhaps that's what makes this legend different from many others. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know we often explore stories that begin with myth. This one didn't. The history came first, the legend came afterward. That distinction matters, because regardless of whether you believe in ghosts, the tragedy behind this story is painfully real. The tree itself may simply be an old oak, but for many people, it has become something much heavier. A reminder that sometimes humanity creates horrors no supernatural force could ever compete with. Now, our next stop couldn't be more different. Leave behind Florida's swamps and humid nights and travel nearly 1,200 miles north to Bernards Township, New Jersey. Here, another tree carries exactly the same name, the Devil's Tree. But unlike Florida's infamous oak, this legend isn't rooted in documented crime. Instead, it's woven together from generations of local folklore, rumors, and stories that have been passed from one family to the next. No one can say with certainty when the legend truly began, and maybe that's part of what keeps it alive. Over the years, several origin stories have taken root. One of the oldest claims says the tree was once used as a gallows during colonial times. Another insists it marks the site of a farmer's murder. Others claim someone took their own life beneath its branches, forever staining the ground around it. None of these stories have been historically verified. They're folklore. But there's one version that appears more often than almost any other. According to the local tradition, members of the Ku Klux Klan, or KKK, once used the area around the tree as a meeting place. Some versions go even further, claiming acts of racial violence or even lynchings occurred nearby. Despite how often this story is repeated, historians have never found conclusive evidence confirming those events at the tree itself. Still, the rumor became inseparable from the legend, and sometimes a rumor can leave scars almost as deep as history itself. Then there's the mystery that made the tree famous. Winter. Imagine standing in the middle of a New Jersey snowstorm. Everything around you is frozen. The fields are white. Your breath hangs in the air. Yet locals insist that the ground immediately surrounding the Devil's Tree stays strangely warm. Some claim snow melts around its base, while everything else remains frozen. Others say frost refuses to cling to the trunk. It's certainly an unsettling image, but scientists have offered several possible explanations. Large trees can absorb and slowly release heat. The soil surrounding mature root systems can drain differently than nearby ground. Sunlight can also warm one patch of earth more effectively than another depending on the landscape. None of those explanations are supernatural. Yet, they don't stop visitors from feeling uneasy when they see a circle of bare ground surrounded by snow. Sometimes, knowing the science doesn't erase the feeling. As night falls, the stories become stranger. Teenagers have been daring each other for decades to walk up and place a hand on the tree after midnight. Simple enough. Touch the bark, count to 10, walk away. Easy until someone hears footsteps, or a branch snap, or they suddenly get the overwhelming feeling that someone is standing directly behind them. More often than not, everyone runs before reaching 10, not because they've seen a ghost, because fear has a remarkable way of turning ordinary sounds into extraordinary experiences. Then comes one of the legend's most famous stories, the ghost truck. Drivers traveling the nearby roads late at night have reported headlights appearing in their rearview mirror. Sometimes they're close enough to make people nervous. Then, without warning, the vehicle is gone. No turn signal, no side road, no passing car, nothing. It's easy to see why the story spread, but there's also a much more ordinary explanation. The winding roads, changes in elevation, and intersecting streets around the area can create the illusion that another vehicle is following closely before its headlights suddenly disappear behind hills, curves, or onto connecting roads. It's an optical trick that fools plenty of drivers. Still, when you're alone on a dark road at 2 a.m, knowing that explanation doesn't always stop your heart from racing. Paranormal investigators have also spent years exploring the area. Some describe hearing whispers, others report sudden cold spots. A few claim electronic equipment behaved unpredictably. Perhaps the most interesting account came from an investigator who said he wasn't frightened. He was overwhelmed by sadness. He described it as though every positive emotion had simply drained away while standing beneath the branches. Moments after walking away, the feeling vanished. Psychologists call this expectation bias. When we believe we're entering a haunted place, our brains become hyper-aware. Our senses sharpen. We notice every sound, every shadow, every shift in temperature. That doesn't mean paranormal experiences aren't real. It simply reminds us that our minds can be incredibly powerful storytellers. So, what makes these two stories so fascinating? One became infamous because of a real human evil. The other became infamous because of stories. One asks us to remember history. The other asks us to question folklore. Yet both inspire the exact same reaction. People lower their voices, they slow their pace, they look over their shoulder, and almost no one walks away completely comfortable. Maybe that's because trees are silent witnesses. They outlive generations, they watch towns grow, roads change, people come and go. Whether they're simply standing there or carrying centuries of whispered stories depends entirely on what you believe. So, after hearing both stories, which tree is actually more frightening? The one connected to documented tragedy, or the one surrounded by centuries of whispers? For me, that's the question that stayed with me long after I finished researching this episode. Because these two legends aren't really about trees, they're about us. Throughout history, people have looked at old trees differently. Long before modern cities, enormous oaks and twisted pines were often believed to be places where the natural world and the supernatural overlapped. Across Europe, stories spoke of cursed trees where witches gathered. In parts of Asia, ancient trees were believed to house spirits that deserved respect rather than disturbance. Many indigenous cultures viewed certain trees as sacred places connected to ancestors, creation, or the land itself. And here in America, isolated trees have become landmarks for ghost stories, forgotten tragedies, and local folklore. Maybe that's because trees outlive us. A single oak can stand for hundreds of years. It silently witnesses celebrations, arguments, storms, wars, and loss. If any living thing could become woven into generations of stories, it would be a tree. But there's another possibility. Maybe haunted places aren't born, maybe they're created. Think about Florida's Devil's Tree. Whether or not the famous oak in Oak Hammock Park is the exact location connected to Gerard John Schaefer's crimes, the legend grew because the community needed somewhere to place the grief. A symbol, a reminder, a way of saying, something terrible happened here, don't forget. Sometimes folklore becomes a way of preserving memory, not because every supernatural claim is true, but because the emotions behind them are. Now think about New Jersey. No documented murder tie themselves to the tree. No confirmed hauntings, no verified curse. Yet generations after generations have added another layer to the story. A whispered warning from a parent, a teenager's dare, a late night drive, a strange coincidence. Eventually, those stories become part of the landscape itself. And after enough years, people stop asking where the legend began. They simply accept that it's always been there. That's something I find fascinating about folklore. It doesn't always require proof. It requires repetition. One person tells a story, another adds a detail. Someone else swears they experienced it firsthand. And before long, a legend has roots just as deep as the tree itself. So, are either of these devil's trees truly haunted? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe the strange experience people report are nothing more than coincidence mixed with expectation. Our brains are remarkable, good at finding patterns, especially in places we already believe are dangerous. Or maybe some places really do carry a weight that can't be measured with cameras or scientific instruments. Not because spirits are trapped there, but because human emotion has a way of lingering. Grief, fear, violence, regret. Even if those feelings exist only within us, they can completely change the way we experience a place. And maybe that's the real lesson tonight. Not every terrifying story needs a monster. Sometimes the darkest legends begin with ordinary people making horrifying choices. Other times, they begin with a rumor told around a campfire that refuses to die. History creates one, imagination creates the other. Yet somehow, both leave us looking over our shoulder. If you ever visit either of these locations, remember something important. Respect the land, respect private property, and above all, respect the real people whose lives were forever changed by the events that inspired one of these legends. Folklore can be entertaining. History deserves compassion. There's a difference. Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. The next time we're walking through an old forest, and you come across a single tree standing alone, ask yourself this: how many people have stood exactly where you're standing? How many secrets has that tree witnessed? How many stories have been told beneath its branches? And if trees could speak, would we actually want to hear what they have to say? Personally, I think I'll stick with podcasts. Trees seem like they'd judge me. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the strange here on Enigmatic Echoez. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, I'd truly appreciate it if you followed the podcast, shared it with someone who loves folklore and urban legends, or left a review. It really helps more curious minds discover these stories. And if your hometown has a legend you've always wondered about, send it my way. Who knows? It might become our next episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay respectful, and maybe don't carve your name into mysterious trees. Worst case, you ruin a perfectly good oak. Best case, you don't accidentally become the next chapter in someone else's ghost story. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next echo. Good night.